So we're at the TinTin Museum, the Herge Museum in Belgium. And you could see the little details. And a quote from Herge is, "If my parents are to be believed, I was never really well behaved unless I had a pencil and a piece of paper in my hand. When I was 7, I used to make little sketches about a street kid. I could only tell you a story through the medium of drawing. That's how it began." Herge, TinTin's. And you have posters, Herge posters of the studio and his art. So this is a rare way to look at the comic strip and see what an art it truly is and how it evolved over the years, in fact, decades. This is the Herge Museum outside Brussels. They even have interviews with Herge that you can listen to. You can rent a headphone and listen. So he started off in 1923 saying, "I was a pupil in a primary school. The war had just broken out. I used to draw little stories at the bottom of my notebooks, adventures without text to them. Dialogue was not necessary. Since I had everything in my imagination, I recall it was about a little chap, a spy, who played 1,001 nasty tricks on the Germans. It was a picture story." And that's 1923. By 1938, he says, "This kind of mental work taxes my mind to the degree that practically every evening I feel completely drained of energy." So it's interesting how he evolves over the years. It gives you a perspective of what Herge thought and how he developed his art. And during the World War II, how he evolved into a satirical illustrator. And this is The Adventures of Totoro. His art spoke to everybody, kids, adults, everybody. And it was universal. The second room in the Herge Museum is dedicated to all his comic strips in different forms. Okay, this one's called Abdallah. And this one's called Nestor. So he was multi-talented. So, a quote from him, "I'm no woman hater, believe me, not at all. In all my stories, almost all the men characters are caricatures, and so are the rare female personages. It is precisely that I'm reluctant to depict a female and comical guise that I present so few real women in my stories. When a man stumbles and sprawls through in the street, people tend to laugh at the sight. When a woman falls, there's no laughter. It is one of the reasons why one should refrain from using too many female characters in stories that depict people in a ridiculous light." So he basically depicted all these characters of his in different ways, and it's funny. So he created all these characters in different forms. Captain Haddock, Professor Calculus, Bianca, Castrofiore, Little Snowy. Herge's world is filled with characters. Tintin, of course. So this is right here. The second room is the room of characters. Herge's characters. Of course, famous bowler hat in Tintin of the Orient, and the bone, Milou's bone. But what attracts attention the most is none other than a magnificent candelabra filled with his characters that we are going to go right here and see. Right here. Check this out. Beautiful candelabra filled with his characters. And the last room here is a downstairs room. I guess it shows probably part of his collection of books and records that he liked. I'm glad he liked the Beatles, Louis Armstrong, and Bob Dylan, and definitely the Pink Floyd. He was also an artist, and apparently he liked cats. So, my kind of guy. And let me see, what else did he have here that is worth mentioning. Artifacts. Cool. Very cute artifacts that he brought from China. So there's a lot of memorabilia here. Tintin memorabilia, including, how they merchandised it. This is interesting because this started quite early on, and it took literally a life of its own. Of course, Disney made it all better, and they, when it came to merchandising, they really took over. So this is the Herge Museum, at least part of it. We cannot photograph the rest, but this is quite a nice collection of his illustrations and what he liked. The museum does have a very nice depictment of Tintin's map, the Pacific Ocean and the Philippines and Saigon and Borneo and the Indian Ocean and Arab lands, what they see, and Persia. So it's really interesting to see where Tintin traveled to. A lot of cartoons based on his characters. And of course, they also have the different characters themselves, two of which. This is one right here. Red Backman's Treasure. Tintin, Captain Haddock, and the Thompsons, guided by some enigmatic instructions left by Captain's illustrious ancestor, go for Red Backman's Treasure, 1945. So this is all the memorabilia and artifact. And then, of course, you have the Calculus affair, and you have the Tournesol affair. Little kids are fascinated. Herge was very fascinated by science, so he created Culprit Calculus, and Herge's world is basically filled with science, and part of it was his fascination. For example, Tintin. Tintin was the first person, I guess, to walk on the moon. Long before the actual person walked on the moon. And I guess this was his spaceship. So, oh, he had a chair in the spaceship and a bed. That's very cool. And a little lab. So he had it all figured out. And they have a round little area that depicts all the books, all the covers in different languages. The world goes round, so does Tintin, and so do the languages. In different languages. These books were translated into languages and for different kids all around the world.